For millennia, every empire made the same fatal mistake. They came here certain they could erase this civilization forever. Any other nation would have vanished into history. But Iran did something no conqueror expected. It survived defeat by reshaping those who defeated it. To understand that power, we have to go back far before empire. Long before modern maps, this plateau was already alive with memory. Ancient settlements here stood beside the first cradles of civilization. Iran was never a footnote. It was one of the original stages of history. Elam rose here as an early geopolitical power. They called themselves Aryans, noble ones, and their homeland, Iran. From the beginning, identity here was forged by mixing, not erasing. But the greatest Persian weapon was not steel. It was worldview. Zoroastrianism turned history into a war between light and darkness. And it transformed time itself from a circle into a line. Beginning, judgment, end. The modern imagination still lives inside that frame. Then came the Medes, and after them, Cyrus. With Cyrus, Iran stopped being a kingdom and became a world system. He conquered without annihilating memory. Darius turned conquest into administration, speed, and order. Roads, taxes, satrapies, gold. Persia became the first superpower. Even so, empire demanded blood. Cyrus died on the frontier, and legend turned his end into warning. The Greeks did not break Persia the way the West remembers. Persia adapted. It bought what armies could not hold. That was the deeper Persian strategy. Rule minds, not just borders. Alexander arrived at the moment of imperial weakness. Alexander arrived at the moment of imperial weakness. He burned Persepolis, but he could not burn the code beneath it. It was a demand for recognition, not nostalgia. The core of Iranian identity was already set in stone. Even in defeat, the Persian court style began to absorb its conquerors. This was a civilization that did not just survive, it reprogrammed its invaders. Alexander died, but his generals became Persian kings in all but name. The memory of the first superpower never truly faded. To find the origins of this endurance, we must look deeper into the soil. The story of Iran is the story of the plateau that would not break. The great Indo-Iranian migrations changed the plateau forever. These tribes carried with them a new identity, the Aryan.
From the word Aryanam, we get the name of the land itself, Iran.
It was a fusion with the ancient people of Elam. The Medes and the Persians emerged from this harsh plateau identity. Survival required a perfect synthesis of culture. Their language roofs linked them to the civilizations of distant Europe. They were naming a homeland that they intended to keep. This consolidation was the true birth of a world power. The civilization was no longer just a tribe. It was a destiny. The plateau was more than just a home. It was a fortress of the spirit. By the 7th century BC, the Medes had unified the scattered tribes. But the world would not truly know Iran until the rise of a single man. Cyrus of the Achaemenids turned the plateau into the heart of the world.
I am Cyrus, king of the world, king of kings.
His vision of empire was built on a radical new idea: respect.
To rule is to protect the traditions of the conquered.
This was the birth of the first multicultural superpower, Sassanid. The Achaemenid peace held because it allowed the world to remain itself.
Thus, the plateau became the center of a line that would never end.
Zoroastrianism emerges as the spiritual bedrock of the plateau. It framed existence as a cosmic war between light and darkness. Iran saw itself as the warrior of light.
They invented the concept of linear time.
A beginning, a final judgment, and a world renewed through fire. These ideas would later shape Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.
The weapon of the plateau was never just iron.
It was the conviction that their history mattered to the universe itself. Before the first superpower, the seeds of ideology had to be planted. Zoroastrianism was more than a faith. It was a cosmic strategy. Light. Light against darkness. Truth against the lie.
The nomadic darkness of the frontier was a constant threat.
Iran saw itself as the chosen warrior of the light. They were the first to invent linear time. A beginning, a final judgment, and a world renewed by fire. These ideas would later shape the foundations of world religions.
Our legacy was built on truth, not just conquest.
The Persian mind, had already conquered the future. The Median state was the first to harness the plateau's true potential. They orchestrated the fall of Assyria, the world's most feared empire.
Then, the Medes and Persians were united under one crown. The Achaemenid Empire rose not just by sword, but by respect. This was a respectful conquest, unlike anything the world had seen. Babylon and Lydia fell, but their gods and memories were preserved.
Darius then reformed the world into satrapies and taxes.
We built roads and a postal system that spanned the known world.
And at the center of this world stood the King of Kings.
I am the architect of a peace that spans continents.
The Achaemenid dream was one of absolute order and unmatched scale.
My decrees were written in clay and stone to outlast time itself.
But even the mightiest superstructures eventually face the gravity of time.
A new storm was gathering in the west, carried by a young Macedonian king.
They think they come to destroy, but they only come to learn.
The spiritual fire of the plateau would prove impossible to extinguish.
Persepolis would burn, but its soul was already part of the soil.
Iran is not a place you conquer. It is a force you absorb.
The first superpower had reached its peak, and the world was about to change forever.
The death of a king often signals the death of his dreams. I faced Queen Tomyris with the weight of an empire on my shoulders.
The end of Cyrus was a moment of deep shock for the Persian world. But the Persian endurance did not die with him.
The Greek-Persian wars are often told from only one side of the sea. Persia did not always fight with steel. They often fought with gold. By funding Greek rivals, they managed the West indirectly.
The king's peace proved that Persian diplomacy was as sharp as any blade.
We mastered our enemies by understanding their internal fractures.
Yet, imperial overstretch began to pull at the edges of the superpower.
By the 4th century BC, the imperial center began to weaken. Corruption and internal strife were hollowing out the Achaemenid structure. But even as the politics failed, the cultural identity remained unshakable.
The shadow of Macedon was growing longer every day.
Alexander was approaching with a hunger that would devour the East.
He saw an empire ready for a new master.
They came to burn, yet they would stay to learn our ways. The spiritual fire of the plateau was the one thing he could not conquer.
The age of the first superpower was ending, but the endurance of the plateau was just beginning. Alexander crushed the Persian armies at Gaugamela. The heart of the empire was exposed and defenseless. Persepolis, the glory of the East, was put to the torch. But as the stone burned, the Iranian survival mechanism was already activating.
To rule Persia, Alexander realized he had to become Persian.
He adopted the royal dress, the court rituals, and the very title of his enemies. Hellenization stalled where the plateau's traditions were deepest. The Seleucid Greeks soon found themselves strangers in an ancient land. Then, from the eastern steppes, the Parthians rose to reclaim the crown. The King of Kings had returned, and Iran was ready to endure the West once again. The Parthians were masters of the plateau, horse archers who defied the Roman legions. Rome found that the East was not a prize to be taken, but a wall that would not move. Iran endured the West's pressure by returning to its roots. They controlled the veins of world trade, keeping the light of the East burning. For centuries, the frontier between Rome and Iran was a theater of pride and power. Neither could truly break the other, creating a stalemate of giants. But a new house was rising, one that would unify the plateau under a sacred fire. The Sassanids were coming, and they would bring a golden age of absolute order. They centralized the state and hardened the spirit of the land. The stage was set for the final, most exhausting war of the ancient world. The Sassanid Golden Age was the final resurgence of the ancient Iranian spirit. They created a centralized state bound by the rigid order of Zoroastrian orthodoxy. This was a society of rigid social order, where every man knew his place beneath the fire. For centuries, they locked horns with Rome and later Byzantium in a dance of equals. But the cost of total war was hollowing out both empires from within. The Sassanids were magnificent, yet they were exhausted by their own glory. Then, a force arrived from the sands of the south that no one had predicted. The Arab Caliphate brought the collapse of the Sassanid state in a few short decades. Islam and the Arabic language spread across the plateau, threatening to erase the past. Yet, as it had done before, the Persian identity refused to vanish into the night. The Sassanid Golden Age was the final resurgence of the ancient Iranian spirit. They created a centralized state, bound by a rigid social and spiritual order. Zoroastrian orthodoxy became the iron spine of the empire. For centuries, they fought Rome and Byzantium to a standstill. But this endless cycle of total war left the empire exhausted. The Arab Caliphate arrived at the moment of ultimate weakness. The Sassanid collapse was swift, But the Iranian heart did not stop. Islam and Arabic spread, yet Persian identity refused to be erased. It was not the end of a world, but the beginning of a transformation. The culture was about to reprogram its newest conquerors. The Abbasid Caliphate soon realized it could not rule without Persian expertise. Persian elites became the architects and bureaucrats of the new Islamic world.
The Persian language survived and flourished as the tongue of poetry and science.
But a new, more terrifying storm was gathering on the horizons of the East. The Mongol invasion brought devastation that threatened to break the plateau forever.
Cities fell and libraries burned, yet the soul of Iran remained intact.
The Ilkhanate Mongols did not destroy the culture. They eventually converted to it. Persian mosques and scholarship became the standard for the new conquerors.
Even Timur, who devastated the land, was seduced by its poetic prestige.
The invaders had become Persianized, proving that the plateau devours every empire. By the 16th century, the plateau was ready to unite under a new banner. Shah Ismail unified the land and established the Safavid state. Shia Islam became the state creed, forever splitting Iran from the Sunni world. This religious shift gave the plateau a new, impermeable boundary. But the modern world was arriving, and with it, the pressure of global powers.
The Qajar dynasty saw the plateau become a chessboard for the great game.
Lands were lost to Russia, and the imperial center began to fracture under foreign debt. Modernization arrived in the form of the Pahlavis, seeking to reclaim the ancient glory.
Persia was renamed Iran, a return to the oldest name of the plateau.
But the final transformation was yet to come, a rupture that would shake the 20th century.
By the 16th century, the plateau was ready to unite under a new banner. Shah Ismail unified the land and established the Safavid state.
Shia Islam became the state creed, forever splitting Iran from the Sunni world.
Modern Iran emerged between ancient memory and geopolitical pressure.
Revolution in 1979 severed one era and opened another.
Today, Persia and Iran still live side by side in the world's imagination. One name sounds mythical. The other sounds strategic.
But both belong to the same land.
And that land still fights the oldest battle of all. How it will be remembered.
For millennia, every empire made the same fatal mistake. Any other nation would have vanished into history. But Iran did something no conqueror expected. It survived defeat by reshaping those who defeated it. This was not mere survival. It was civilizational gravity. To understand that power, we have to go back far before empire.
Long before modern maps, this plateau was already alive with memory.
Ancient settlements here stood beside the first cradles of civilization.
Iran was never a footnote. It was one of the original stages of history.
And the plateau remains, a civilization that simply refuses to be forgotten.